All right. Thank you, Christina. Thank you all for having me. Hopefully, what I'm going to share with you will be of some value as you think about ways to advocate for your spaces and your work here. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can share my screen. So give me one moment here. All right. Hopefully you all are seeing a presentation now.
Yes.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about uh, spaces and faces here, or faces and spaces. If I can move my toolbar out of the way so that I can actually see what I'm doing. All right, so I am Jesse Bishop. I'm the Dean of Office Planning, the Office of Planning, Assessment, Accreditation, and Research. We call ourselves PAR here on the Georgia Highlands campus. I've been with the institution for many, many years. In lots of different roles, adjunct faculty member, tenure track faculty member, tenured faculty member, director of faculty development, and the CETL. And now I work in IR, IE, and strategic planning. So let's talk a little bit about libraries and hubs. So this is an outsider's take on why libraries are the rooms where whatever it is, happens. I am a big fan of libraries, in part because I see them as welcoming spaces with often welcoming faces. Libraries, and you all know this because you work here, but again, this is my view as an advocate, as a partner. A lot of times I see the library as a first line for students, especially those new to the college experience. It's often centrally located, both physically and virtually, for students. I've not been to all of your web pages, but I would dare to venture that your web spaces are pretty prominent for your libraries. Hopefully you have some good real estate virtually. But I have been to many campuses, and I know that the libraries are often central hubs for students on those physical spaces. And then there's also this idea of third places. And this is something that I know Julius has talked to me about lots of times. And I'm sure that you all have considered, the library as a third place, home being a place, work being a place, and then libraries becoming this other social place, right? And so they're really hubs for me for, physical hubs, intellectual hubs, resource hubs, social hubs, right? And there are ways to leverage that, I think, as you're advocating, that flips over into things like curriculum design and committee work that really guides the institution. And yet we all know, hopefully we've not worked with too many of them, that folks think that this is, the library, right? It's just a bunch of shelves with books on them, right? People are sort of removed from the equation. It's just sort of a passive place. And I'll tell you, I personally love a noisy library. I'm all for quiet study rooms. I know that some students need that. But I genuinely love the busyness of a library and the exchanges that are happening there in terms of knowledge, in terms of the social exchanges, the planning that happens. And so that's really what I want to talk to you about today. It's sort of three examples of how we formed library partnerships here at GHC during my time and in my various roles. And what how we advocated for the space and some of the outcomes for what that work looked like. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is special topics courses, or how I learned to stop worrying and love FYE courses. So a few years ago, we had this thing called FCST 1010, and it was a very basic study skills course. Those of you who work within the USG know that you can offer a course like that outside of the core itself as an institutional option, but we really wanted something that counted for credits for students. And so we started thinking about ways to move this course into Area B. The guidance that we had gotten from the USG said that, the Area B courses needed to be more than just study skills. So we took the approach to look at some special topics courses that already existed, and kind of repurpose those to be FYE style courses. And really, and we started doing this work sort of pre-momentum. And we were doing that because we wanted to get folks excited about potential majors and have this be a recruiting tool as well. So one of the first folks that we recruited in this project was a librarian named Maggie. And I picked Maggie in that process because she was so passionate about this work. She was so excited. She was really, really engaged in the research on FYE courses and the outcomes, and really, she became that advocate for me to pull in from the library to help flip some things around. So the cool thing that happened there is that as Maggie is working with us, other faculty members that we brought in started to see that enthusiasm and started to see that she had knowledge outside of just, and I'm doing the air quotes here, you all can't see me, but outside of just librarianship, right? And I know that librarianship encompasses a lot, but a lot of folks don't always understand that. And I was talking to Julius recently about the fact that most librarians, at least the ones I know, certainly did not get bachelor's degrees in library science and then master's degrees in library science, right? They have a bachelor's degree in an area, in a discipline. They got a master's degree in library science. Oftentimes they have second masters, especially at some of the larger schools. I think that might be a requirement actually, so that they can teach these courses or be content and subject matter experts. So I really wanted to have faculty see and be able to showcase that. And Maggie was sort of the ideal person for this before she left us and went on to greener pastures. But that really started to change some of the faculty attitudes about librarians. Now we're very fortunate at GHC. I think our faculty and our librarians. Our library faculty have really good relationships right out of the gate. We're kind of a mid-sized institution, but we feel very small most days. And so I think there are a lot of really good relationships there. So there wasn't a lot of work that had to happen there, but it was nice to see some of those extra things being showcased. The other thing we did was bring people into the library. So all of our planning took place in the library itself. And we really used that as a hub to get people in and to workshop and to, I am a whiteboard lover. You get me in a room with 4 or 5 whiteboards and my heart is very happy and I just go to town. And the library provided that space for us. And so that was sort of a step in that direction. So then another partnership that we formed, so as I was moving out of faculty and into faculty development, we formed some CETL partnerships. And again, looking at those faces and spaces, I really wanted to normalize the library as a hub and a place where people would go and be. And this also allowed me to showcase the importance of this work to administrators. So one of the first things we did was host our new faculty academy in the libraries. Even before I really formally moved into faculty development, I was still doing some of that work, and we would often have events in the library, in part to bring new faculty in and just kind of normalize that this is where you go for these types of activities. This is a partner, this is a place for you. And it allowed me to bring in administrators and really kind of showcase what the library could be used for outside of just shelves full of books. With our provost at the time, we didn't really have to make that argument all that much. And we certainly don't have to make it now with our current provost, who's an interim president or about to be an interim president. Anyway, it's a little messy here right now, but the idea here is that you get the administrators in and they're able to see this work that's happening. It breaks down silos, it creates bonds with folks. We started inviting our new librarians to join Faculty Academy, in part to kind of elevate their status as faculty members, but also, again, to create some of that bonding and to really try to make sure that folks were forming relationships and understanding that the library was a tool full of, physical, material resources, but also human resources, right? People that brought expertise and passion. So then the third example I want to give you here is the Gen Ed assessment redesign. And I think I saw in the participants list there this morning, I think I saw Susanna, and Susanna Smith here at GHC has been involved with assessment redesign. I think that's correct, isn't it, Susanna? Okay, yeah. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't about to talk out of turn here. Having a librarian on our Gen Ed assessment redesign has given us a lot of valuable insight, and it goes much beyond insight into things like, well, we have these databases or we have these resources for students to use as part of the curriculum, but really giving the library a voice in that process, but also, again, kind of showing other faculty members and other departments the value outside of material resource that the library brings. And that's really kind of a big thing for me. Over the course of my, nearly 20 years now at Georgia Highlands, I've worked with a lot of librarians and faculty members who have been just great resources. They're very passionate. They're very engaged with the work that they do, and bring this expertise and this different perspective. And it's that alternative perspective sometimes that is most helpful with things like Gen Ed redesign. So those are just sort of three quick ways that are quick examples of things that we've done to really kind of engage and bring those folks on. So I want to talk a little bit about a couple of other elements here, because I want to make sure that I'm not leading you down the wrong path. So prior to this particular meeting, Christina and Julius sent us some questions. I think Christina sent us some questions. And so I've tried to go through here and kind of answer some of those, right? So the library, especially instruction librarians here at GHC, play a vital role in our sort of the greater picture, the bigger picture at the college. I mean, they're engaged in so much of the work that we do. And I think that's because of who they are. But I also think that's because there are folks in leadership, sort of, at the top level and at the mid levels, who are engaged with the library and who advocate and who help bring people in. And so those relationships really matter. And we really try to make sure that the library is foundational in that work. I've done a lot of work recently on a new strategic plan, and the library is often one of the easiest places for me to find ways to make sure that they fit into the strategic plan, because they touch on so much, right? And so often at-risk students will seek out the library as a place to ask questions and find answers. And you can enhance this by partnering with your CEDLs, with your IR/IE units, with your student success and counseling units. I mean, there are lots of different ways to pull in and really help those at-risk students. But I'll tell you, as a first-gen student who early on didn't really feel like he belonged in college, the library was my go-to place. If I had questions, I made a friend at the front desk, and I could go in and check out books. But I could also go in and ask that person, hey, what do I do in this particular situation, and how do I make sure that I'm doing the things I need to do and getting the help I need to get here. My apologies, I hit the wrong button there and skipped ahead. So at GHC, we really tried to bake information literacy into those special topics, GHC 2901 courses, and into our Gen Ed assessment work. And we did that again by partnering, by making sure that we were advocating, by asking the right questions. I think at one point in our Gen Ed assessment redesign, there was a conversation about information literacy and digital literacy. And I know those two things are a little bit different there, or maybe a lot of bit different, but really having those two things as sort of sidebars for some of the work that we were doing. And ultimately, we came to the conclusion that this is foundational to what we do, and we need to make sure that that's represented in that work. So there are little moments like that where you can use those planning documents, you can use those planning processes as levers to help advocate for your spaces and for your faces as well. And to show the values of libraries, you can engage your deans and provosts, again, with faces and spaces. Get your folks to offer to chair committees whenever that's appropriate, and have them host meetings in spaces. Again, I'm not a librarian. I'm a huge fan of libraries and librarians, and I think that matters. I think, being in those spaces as much as we can, realizing, of course, we're still in a pandemic. There are ways to make those things work. Now, I also don't want to pitch all of this to you and not address the fact that there are sometimes some inherent risks in things. So one of the things that came up in conversations about this presentation and about some of the work that we were doing around this is this idea of proving your worth. And you may have some folks on your campus leadership who don't necessarily see the value of your libraries. I certainly hope that is not the case. And I don't want to tell you that I have a one size fits all approach. But the more you can partner up with folks from outside of your libraries who are in leadership positions, and even playing the long game, if you have folks that you see as up and coming leaders, right, working with them can play the long game, 2, 3, 5, 10 years out, even depending on, how you want to kind of set that up. That can be really helpful in, again, and I put the quotes in here, proving your worth. I mean, I see the inherent worth. I know the worth, in part because I work in compliance as well. And that is a significant portion of the work that we do with compliance, is talking about the library resources, but also the personnel and the value that that really brings. Another risk, I think, is volunteering to take on additional activities like for-credit teaching. That could be seen as needing more work to do. And I've heard arguments like this before. So my advice here would be to ground this activity in supporting student success, right? If you ground everything in student success, it makes it much, much harder for folks to think that wanting to be engaged in this means that you need something else to do, right? It means that, it's an integral part to what you're doing. And, I think about on our campus, the work that our librarians do with advising, the work that they do with bibliographic instruction, the work that they do being embedded into our online courses, the work that they do in hosting events on campus, back when we could still do that. And as we're looking forward to doing that again, that are really focused on helping students. I think that is really, really important, framing it in that student success approach. I think another risk is asking all of your people to go out and be brand ambassadors. That can be somewhat risky. So my advice there would be make sure you've got the right people for the right jobs. There are some folks that are very well suited to go out and be, if you've ever done, I think it's Strengths Finders, right? Your woo people, right? If you've got your woo people, that's great. If you don't have your woo people, then, maybe you can cultivate that with them, but you've got to be aware of, who your folks are and what their strengths are and how they can get engaged. So if you've got someone who isn't, highly organized and, really passionate about something, maybe asking that person to chair a committee is not the right move. But if they're sort of, a quiet workhorse, then get them on the committee and they'll contribute in that way. And I've seen that go in a couple of different directions. And my experience has been that librarians come in all shapes and personalities, and I love that about them, just like, instructional faculty in the disciplines. But it's really about making sure you've got the right people for the right tasks. And that's one thing that I think our folks at GHC do very, very well. And so that's really it for me. I just wanted to kind of share a few examples of things that I've done. And now I'm looking back in the chat here, and I see Susanna gave Melanie a shout out. So Melanie, thank you for the work that you've done on assessment and the Gen Ed redesign for us, and really, really appreciate that. So now I'll zip it and turn it over, I think, to Jamie is going to go next, and I'll hang around to answer questions here at the end.
Yep. And I'm in, folks. I just had to switch to my personal computer. KSU got crabby today about joining GHC system. So Jamie, once you're ready to share your slides, that'll be great. And folks, if you have questions, you can put them into the chat, or if you have a question that you don't feel comfortable asking publicly, you can directly message me, Christina, and I will then report out your question minus your name at the end of these sessions. Okay, so I'll mute myself now.
Well, I just want to thank all of you for inviting me to be part of your meeting today. I think this is a fantastic topic, talking about advocacy for our libraries. I am focusing particularly on library representation and curriculum development. And my name is Jamie O'Connor. I am the assessment coordinator in institutional assessment and accreditation at Georgia Southern University. And I work very closely with our academic program assessment, as well as our general education and core course assessment, which is where my involvement in the curriculum process comes from. I know many of you know my colleague, Nikki, but I'm going to give her a chance to introduce herself now, and then we're going to kind of bounce back and forth on this as we present two different perspectives on this collaboration that we've had.
Thank you, Jamie. And I am Nikki Retch. I'm one of the research services librarians at Georgia Southern Library. Specifically, I am the liaison to the College of Science and Mathematics, as well as some others, since we've had a few retirements in the past year or so. And I'm also the Affordable Learning Georgia Library Champion for this institution.
So we'd like to start off this morning by kind of telling a little bit of the backstory about how our partnership came about, and then also kind of bringing that forward into some of the lessons that we learned and some potential advocacy talking points that you can bring to your own campuses. So I know that you all are aware that the system had proposed a general education redesign. And on our campus, we don't have a centralized general education director or a specific person who oversees our general education program. That's handled by our general education and core curriculum committee. And my office supports the work of that committee. I am the coordinator for that committee, meaning that I help with a lot of the logistics of their meeting scheduling, agendas, minutes, and also kind of providing some additional research support and curriculum review support for that committee as well. So if you are interested in our overall general education redesign process, we have put a lot of information on our website. And so I am going to share the link to that in the chat in case you'd like to dig into that in a bit more at some point in time. If I can find the chat, which is not popping up for me right now. Well, I'll try to get that in before we're finished talking today. But this is kind of the process that we started with. And our office proposed 6 phases that our general education redesign would follow. Over the past year, we've been primarily focused on phase 1, information gathering, and phase 2, student learning outcome development and thematic journey development. So what this has looked like on our campus, we went through an information gathering process that started with a series of Gen Ed redesign town hall meetings. We held 32 town hall meetings over Zoom. This was in the fall semester. So, everyone was remote working, remote teaching at that time. We included faculty, staff, students, and alumni in those sessions. We found that we got a lot of information from those, but student participation was not particularly high. And so we followed up with a campus-wide student survey to which we had over 2,000 responses. And taking all of that information, we kind of realized that there were about 12 departments or units that we needed to form stronger partnerships with, that they had a particular stake in the things that were planned for the general education redesign, one of those being our university libraries. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with this graphic that comes from Dr. Tristan Denley's presentation on the general education redesign. We feel, of course, that information literacy should be applied to all of these colored bars on the screen. But we did realize that that was an important place where we needed our librarians to be involved in the development of the curriculum. but that there were also a lot of other critical areas where our librarians had a lot to contribute to this process.
And it should be noted that as faculty on the Georgia Southern campus, our librarians are already on university committees. And so we typically have 2 representatives on the GECC all the time. One is elected and one is appointed by the faculty senate. So there already was some library representation on this committee.
Definitely. And so to kind of break that down a little bit further, as we started moving into that phase 2 for developing our student learning outcomes, each college at our institution has 2 representatives on our GECC, but that's not really a lot of people to do work of this scope. And we also realized that there were specific departments and areas that didn't have direct representation. So we formed 13 subcommittees. And we invited partners from various disciplines as well as other offices across our campus to join in these subcommittees. And as you can see, University Libraries was very high on that list. So our College of Arts and Humanities, College of Science and Mathematics had the largest slice of representation, primarily because they offer a significant number of courses in our current core, but University Libraries was really far up there at the top of that list of representation. And so to boil that down a little bit further, we ended up with these 13 committees, 1 committee for each of the disciplinary areas, a committee for each of those kind of overlays that weave through the new core, and then a committee for general education mission and vision, and for thematic journeys. And our libraries were represented on the committees that are highlighted here in red. And Nikki's going to share a little bit about how we were able to get such significant library representation on these subcommittees.
So as Jamie mentioned, they did do some town hall meetings, which some of us attended. And then they also had a meeting targeted specifically at the libraries. And in this instance, all of the librarians who were liaisons to particular areas were invited to attend that meeting. And most of us did, I would say. Once it came up that they were going to be forming these subcommittees, we brought it to our liaisons committee within the library once again, and kind of broke down the information on each of these subcommittees that Jamie and her group had provided for us. And we basically just put out the volunteer call, and really pushed that if this was in your liaison area, or you felt particularly drawn to a particular one of these areas, or felt your strengths really catered to one of these areas, to please consider volunteering for this, because we wanted to make sure that the librarians had a voice in these things that were about to be developed within the curriculum. Now, we're not a super large university, and we have, as I mentioned, lost some people. We are down some librarians, as many of you are, retirements, and few people just moving on, especially during the pandemic. So we didn't feel that we could get somebody on every committee without people really having to double up or even possibly triple up on it. But we wanted representation on what we considered some of the main ones, or what anyone felt comfortable with.
And I know from our perspective, we would have been thrilled to have librarians on as many of these committees as possible. So we were really, really pleased with the response and the distribution of our university libraries across all of these subcommittees. And I do think that they made really significant contributions to the conversations that happened in these various subcommittees. Nikki chaired our subcommittee on information literacy because she is currently one of the library representatives on the General Education and Core Curriculum Committee, and she also served on the Science subcommittee. And so we really tried to kind of develop some creative combinations of faculty and staff, those involved in student success offices as well, on these various committees. So in addition to all the contributions that our librarians made through participation in the subcommittees, Nikki also gave us a wonderful gift. through developing some library resource guides that we set up one of these for each of the general education subcommittees that had kind of some starting materials for them. So from our office, we gave some best practice guidelines on developing student learning outcomes. We gave some example student learning outcomes from other institutions. We shared some preliminary assessment resources and curriculum and instruction resources. And then the subcommittees could build on that from there. So Nikki, if you want to talk a little bit more about kind of the ulterior motive of the resource guides.
Absolutely. Yeah. Y'all, this is where Jesse's comment on your passion comes in. I am a Spring Share cheerleader. I will create a LibGuide for everything. I use them heavily. And during our meeting with Jamie and her group, I just casually mentioned, you know, we have these library guides. I don't know if you've seen them before. Let me pull one up and show you what they can do. And this would be a great way to be organizing your information, and faculty are used to them because we use them in our teaching. So it's going to be something that's familiar to them. It's easy to get to. They're very easy to update and manipulate. And so they took the bite, which was fantastic, because as Jamie mentioned, you know, part of that was a little bit of selfish motivation, because since they're library guides, I'm the quote unquote owner for every single one of these. And then we had librarians, of course, on these subcommittees. So Jamie and her crew were listed as co-editors. And then of course, any of our librarians were also co-editors. So we had a back end view of everything that was going on within this curriculum redesign. And there were certain things that we were like, oh, wait, that information is really outdated. We need to kind of let them know that there's something better out there, or I'm not sure this is organized quite the way we would be framing it with our information literacy teaching. You know, let's bring something else in. So it really gave us a way to kind of, for lack of a better word, manipulate some of the resources that were going in there. And because LibGuides are easy to learn, it was just a simple, maybe 20-minute training for Jamie and her crew to get the knack of how to basically add information. And then, of course, they have librarians on their team if they have any problems with it in any way.
And I can say, as a staff person working in assessment, I was not aware of the library guides. And so when Nikki introduced these to me, I immediately saw the great potential here. And I am now also in love with them and have built them for other purposes for our office as well. So, as we were building these, kind of one of the things we had in the back of our mind was that eventually this is something that we could pivot to be a little bit more focused towards faculty, to give them resources for developing new courses or potentially revising current courses as part of the curriculum process in going through the general education redesign. So as we were building and adding resources here from the subcommittees, that was kind of our long view of where these would eventually go and what the audience would eventually be. Which leads me to what we are hoping will happen next is that we will move into phase 3, which is curriculum design. As we all know, the system has put the gen ed redesign on pause. However, our GECC committee is planning to bring the redesign back to the table in fall to discuss if it's something that we want to continue to pursue as an institution while we wait for more definite guidance from the system. But as part of our curriculum design, we had plans to form a very intentional collaboration between our office, our Center for Teaching Excellence, and our university libraries to create resources for faculty who are in the process of developing new courses or revising courses. We also had planned to offer some hands-on workshops where faculty could come together and kind of work collaboratively on building some of these new courses or curriculum pieces. And we saw this as a real opportunity for the libraries to represent some of their initiatives and interests, like OERs and information literacy. There would also be opportunities for the library itself to propose some courses that could be introduced to the core. And the way that our curriculum process works at Georgia Southern, anyone can propose a course to the core at any time if they simply complete the course proposal paperwork, submit it to the curriculum process. It comes to the General Education and Core Curriculum Committee. We review it and discuss it. If it's approved by the GECC, then it goes through the rest of our curriculum process through undergraduate committee, faculty senate, and eventually on to the BOR. So that's something I know I saw in the preliminary questions before the session that someone was interested in how to do that. And that's definitely something that's a possibility, not just part of a redesign, but really at any time, something that could be considered as part of your curriculum.
And as Jamie mentioned, we're hoping to work OER into that as well. This is another benefit of possibly having a lot of this on the LibGuide, because these were where these subcommittees placed all of their working documents and the material they were coming up with. This will give some insight into anything that may be in the pipe to be developed down the line or completely reworked from a class that already exists. My hope is that we create a situation where we just strongly encourage any faculty putting forth a new course or completely reworking a course to evaluate and explore the OER options in that process.
And I will say that another kind of benefit of Nikki and I's partnership is that she has recruited me and kind of trained me now as an OER advocate. And so as a person working in the assessment office who often works with faculty on curriculum, I will sometimes get questions about textbook recommendations or things like that. And I am always ready and willing now to promote OERs as a potential option for courses that they may be reworking. So we did want to share a few of our lessons learned. As we mentioned, our university libraries do have representatives on our curriculum committees currently. If that's not the case for your institution, that's absolutely something you should advocate for. And I will add to that, that even if you don't have official representation on that committee, you can always ask to be invited to the committee meetings as a guest. So as the coordinator for the GECC on our campus, we often have faculty ask to attend specific meetings because there's a topic on the agenda that's of interest to them. We never say no. So those really are open committees. So if there is a committee that you think you would like to be aware of what they're doing with curriculum, reach out to the committee chair, reach out to the committee coordinator and ask if you can be included in those meetings as a guest. Also, if you really want to be involved in curriculum on your campus, it's important to be aware of what the curriculum deadlines are, when the committee meetings are happening, what's on the agenda, what's in the minutes. So if you see something on the agenda where you feel like, hey, there's a real opportunity here where I could advocate for library involvement in this particular curriculum development, that's something you can, again, reach out to that committee chair, ask if you can have 5 minutes to talk about how the library could contribute to a particular process. I'd also recommend offering resources and support wherever you can find that possibility or that opportunity. I know everybody right now is trying to do more with less, and that includes our faculty. And so if you can show faculty, I have resources that can make your life easier, that's very much the approach that our office tries to take with assessment. Let me help you streamline this. Let me give you some additional guidelines that can help to simplify. Let me show you how to make your data more meaningful. Those kinds of offers tend to generate good partnerships. Also to make contact early and often. And I know Nikki and I were talking about this earlier this week, that sometimes it can be frustrating when you're continually promoting library resources and it seems to be falling on deaf ears, but you never know when the right message might hit the right inbox at the right time. And along with that, to also consider creative ways of communicating those library resources beyond just an email and an inbox. So I worked with a librarian very early in my teaching career who actually put together something that looked like a takeout menu. And she gave really creative names to some of the workshops and resources that the library offered. She had a set of appetizers that were kind of the introductory level of information literacy instruction, and then the main courses, which were targeted more at those kind of major courses that students got into in their programs. And the desserts were aimed at the capstone senior experience courses. And that really got some attention because it was a different and kind of creative approach to getting that message across. And also finding partners on your campus. I know Center for Teaching and Learning is a fairly obvious partner, but also thinking about who the representatives are on your assessment and curriculum committees. And don't forget about your institutional effectiveness and assessment office, because they also touch curriculum at various points in the process. And so they can help to become advocates for you in that way as well. Did you want to add anything to that, Nikki?
Yeah, my main thing is, simply, y'all, this is not the time to be humble and sweet and meek. Own your expertise on some of these areas and don't be afraid to speak up, regardless of what you're in. Again, we're on committees at Georgia Southern. I was on a faculty service committee. So we're looking at applications where faculty are putting in proposals for service projects they want to do, and they're asking for money. Speak up when needed. We had one where they wanted cameras and green screens. And I'm like, there's no need for them to spend money on this. The library has it. They can just check that out and spend this money elsewhere. Or one group wanted to outsource a project that should belong in our special collections. Be willing to speak up. It's like, no, this does not need to go outside the campus. Our special collections group can handle what they want. So again, the money they're asking for can go to something more beneficial to that grant. Don't be afraid to say, hey, we have LibGuides. We can help you make one that will help you, get through this process and streamline some things, as Jamie said. Make it to where they are fully aware of all these things that they don't think of beyond maybe just the typical instruction.
Absolutely. And I'll add to that, if you're just getting started with advocating for yourself, like really finding just one partnership is a starting point. And I am so grateful for the partnership that Nikki and I have, because I have benefited tremendously from the resources and the knowledge and expertise that she has shared. And I like to think that I, in turn, am advocating well for the things that are important to her in terms of library, offerings and initiatives and resources. So it's been a wonderful reciprocal relationship. And I think that, as Jessie mentioned too, finding those right people can really have an exponential ripple effect across your campus. And so I think that that's something to really consider, is starting somewhere. Starting with that one right person can make a big difference.
Yes, and y'all, if you haven't checked out Strength Finders, it's one of my favorite assessments out there. I'm not kidding. I worked at a previous institution where they implemented that fully. It is fantastic. I will tell you that 3 out of my top 5 strengths are in relationship development umbrella. So, this type of advocacy work fits right up my alley, but you may have folks, even in your liaison group, which we do, that's not really their strength, and that's okay. Don't try to push them out there in a way that might be detrimental to the library. We literally shuffled some things around to place me on GECC rather than the original person who was recommended for this committee. Not that that person isn't a fabulous librarian, but we just knew that that person's skill sets didn't really fit this particular committee. So we were shuffled around, and I'm on this one, and that librarian is on another one that suits them much better.
And just to sum up with a few advocacy talking points, librarians bring a wealth of resources and support to curriculum development. And as Nikki said, speak up about your expertise, speak up about the knowledge and the resources that you have. There's so much benefit from having librarians involved in the curriculum process. And it's something that a lot of faculty or people on curriculum committees might not think of unless you point it out to them. And so that's very important. Also, I think we all here would agree that information literacy skills would add value to any course in general education in particular, specifically because we're talking within the framework of the Gen Ed redesign. But obviously, that's a skill set that our students are going to need to continue to have in the future and something that needs to be embedded in those courses. And finally, because I am an assessment person, I have to put in a plug for demonstrating the value of what you do through assessment data. So if you are currently offering information literacy instruction, whether those are in workshops or embedded in specific courses, make sure that you are collecting assessment data that shows that students are progressing in their knowledge and skills in those areas. That assessment data can help you make a really powerful argument to chairs and deans in terms of persuading them that this is a value added component of this curriculum. Even better if you can connect that data to your institutional mission or strategic plan. Even better if you can connect that assessment data to employment trends that you're seeing for students in your area. So if you're not sure where to get started with that, reach out to the assessment office on your campus, explain to them what you want to do, ask them if they can help you to develop assessment methods and tools and resources that you can use as part of your instruction.
And y'all, most of this can be embedded in your LibGuides. I'm just saying. I have lots of assessment work just embedded in the LibGuides for the students to do either as a flipped curriculum or at the end of our sessions.
Yeah, assessment can be very simple and very streamlined. It doesn't have to be something difficult or a huge extra burden. It's definitely something that can just live within the culture of the course that you're doing. And that sums up everything that we wanted to share this morning. So I am going to stop sharing my screen, but thank you all very much.
And thank you, everyone. Jesse, Nikki, Jamie, you have all shared so much valuable information. I'd like to open the floor to any questions at this point, and you can either chat them in, or if you feel so inclined, microphone and video in. We are in Zoom. And then I have some questions if anyone is shy, but I'll just wait a second. Okay, I'll go with our first. Okay, I'll go with our first question, which is, what types of messages do you think resonate most in terms of promoting library inclusion in classrooms? And I think, Jesse, you might have a good answer for this, or Jamie. I mean, you've just been talking about it, but is there a particular message that you think is persuasive at making a case for libraries and librarians to join our fellow teaching faculty in the classroom?
I think for me, the first argument would be the focus on student success and caring about seeing our students be successful. Then I think it depends on what what you see the outcome or what you want the outcome of that interaction to be, that partnership to be. If the goal is to strengthen, and I'll just pick one that's sort of low hanging fruit for me. If the goal is to strengthen information literacy, right, then lead with that, right? We want to help your students be better at this thing in your area. If you've got library faculty who are passionate about a particular discipline or who have a background in that, that's often a good place to start. I think early on in my career, some of my favorite conversations and the ways that I got to know some of the librarians were just conversations about books. I'm a reformed English professor, and so we would often talk about contemporary books, or some of our favorite books, or some of our most problematic books. And I would always put books on reserve in the library And I would go in and make sure everything was set up, and my students would be able to get access to things. One of them, Jeannie, one of our former librarians, we would always have these great conversations about, oh, I'm so glad to see you're teaching this. This is one of my favorite books, or favorite films in some cases. And so we would have those conversations, and I'm like, hey, why don't you do the BI for my class, the bibliographic instruction, because you care about this, you're passionate about this particular topic, and this is going to translate for my students. So I think, again, that passion, that expertise, that those are the ways that I think I would probably start with those conversations, maybe.
I agree. And I think speaking from my own experience when I was a brand new faculty member, just having a librarian come to me and say, I can help was huge, and such a relief. And we actually started, I taught college composition for a number of years. And so we actually started by just going through my syllabus and looking at, okay, what are the things the students are doing, and where could she come into the classroom and either co-present on specific topics or just present on specific topics. I think it was beneficial for the students just to have a different face and a different voice in the classroom. And once they got to know her in the context of my class, they were much more likely to go to the library and ask questions because they saw that librarian as a person who was helpful and approachable for them. And so I think just that message of I'm here to help is really huge. You're muted, Christina.
Of course, I'm trying to be polite and there my mouth is going and you guys hear nothing. Okay, so earlier you both touched on assessment. And so we have had a question come in asking about what is momentum approach, and could you speak a little bit about how libraries could perhaps participate in that, that initiative?
I feel weird being the guy jumping in every time, but this is actually a significant portion of what I do these days. Though hopefully I'm handing some of this work off very soon. So if you want the 30-second pitch for momentum approach, it is bubbles and brownies. Go see one of Dr. Denley's presentations. That'll make sense. But momentum approach is really about how do we build student success into some of the work that we're doing, focusing on some key areas, right? So some of those key areas are things like purpose, mindset, catapult courses, as I've heard him call them, credit hour loads, these type of things. So as we're talking about ways to really enhance the student experience and set them up for success, for me, I think about our library faculty and with regard to mindset, again, that space, that physical space being one of the places that students go, having a warm, welcoming, supportive, growth mindset oriented staff can be really, really helpful. Now, there are lots of other ways to get involved. There's, as part of Momentum Year or Momentum Approach, there's the mindset survey. So it's a kind of a separate thing, but it's part of this. There are ways to use those data with your library faculty, with your colleagues, to think about what you're doing to launch students into a growth mindset and make them feel comfortable in the space. And really, on some level, for me, it's about supporting failure, right? Helping them learn to fail the right ways and learn from that failure. I coach soccer, and my children, both the biological ones and the ones that are on my teams, will tell you that my personal motto is fail better, right? And that's a big piece of that growth mindset. That's also a big piece of momentum, is helping students learn to overcome those challenges. And so I think there are lots of different ways that library faculty and support staff can get involved in that work. And believe you me, there's plenty of work to go around with that project. But that's also, again, I feel like I keep talking about the passion piece, but that's really, again, that's part of it. You know, there are so many opportunities for library faculty to bring different perspectives because they see students in a different setting than faculty members do, right? Oftentimes, library faculty will see students in a crisis, right? They're in the library, they're trying to figure something out, or they're on the help chat trying to figure something out, and the library faculty member becomes the person who is sort of mitigating that tension. So I think there's a lot of really good work that can happen there related to momentum year or momentum approach.
Thank you. And I'm just seeing that it's 11:02, which is the official end time of this session. So I want to give our audience the opportunity to ask any final questions. And then our team has planned to leave this Zoom room open for another 30 minutes or so, just in case anyone wants to kind of I've heard it called parking lot chats, and we can set up breakout rooms for people who want to go off and have little conversations amongst themselves. But does anyone have any final questions? You can type them into the chat or microphone in if you so choose. Okay, I am not seeing anything. So I would say I hope everyone has a lovely Thursday afternoon and that we all have a wonderful lunch. And Nikki shared that that she can put you in touch with some folks who can share a lot of information about mindset if that's what you're interested in. So please reach out to Nikki if that's something you'd like to hear more of. And I just want to thank all of our presenters, Jamie, Jesse, Nikki, for sharing this information with us. It's given me some things to take back to my own institution, I know. Okay, well, thank you, everyone.